Let's start the show. You already know who it is. My name is Mike Kyle, aka the Fantasy Vulture. I have over a decade worth of fantasy football experience and have continuously competed for fantasy championships over the course of the past 6 seasons. Let's make it 7 in 2020. But enough of me. I'm here for you on today's episode of the FB Show. We're going to continue our All-32 NFL team preview series, taking a look at every NFL team through the lens of fantasy football. Up next, we are wrapping up the NFC North by talking about the Chicago Bears. Now, before we even get started, a few quick things I need from you. First off, smash that subscribe button, power running back style, so you never miss a video from me. I'm pretty much doing this every single day leading up until September. I'm trying to knock out these team previews as quickly and as efficiently as possible. I think we're going to pretty much go like Monday through Saturday, or at a minimum Monday through Friday. And then I think if we follow that trend, we'll be done exactly on August 31st. So I'm really excited about that because my goal initially was to finish them up by September, or by September 10th, because that was when the season started. And now I moved my deadline up to September 1st. So we are right on track for that right now. I'm really excited. But if you are excited for this video in particular, be sure to hit that like button, like an open receiver downfield, Patrick Mahomes style. And without further ado, let's jump into the Chicago Bears. It's interesting with them. The way that I really structured this series to work was, maybe this was to a fault of my own and just my own lack of foresight, but you knew eventually like there are just going to be teams that don't have a whole lot of light shining their way, right? Especially for fantasy, because fantasy predominantly favors better offenses, better teams. And with the Bears, there's not a whole lot of fantasy intrigue here. Like that was the thing, right? As I'm making like each player profile, like I'm going through the list, and it's like I have 7 guys that I could talk about, but I'm really only excited for like 2 or 3 of them at most. And so I've been kind of just dreading this video in particular, but I got the Mountain Dew here. Hashtag no free ads. We're up, we're energized, we're ready to go. And I think the big reason why I'm so down on making this video is because I like to start off with quarterbacks. And the quarterback situation in Chicago is not great right now. And we're going to start off by talking about Mitch Trubisky, quarterback for the Chicago Bears, entering year 4. And there's obviously a lot of talk about what the Bears will do with Trubisky. They trade for Nick Foles, who we're also going to talk about during this. And, you know, it's one of those things where maybe Mitch hasn't done everything right. There's certainly a lot of things that he has done wrong. But then you also combine that with the fact that they traded up to get him, and they passed on Deshaun Watson. It was Deshaun and Patrick Mahomes in the same draft. And that's just a tough look, right? So it's not all Mitch's fault. It's obviously what happened to some of the guys drafted after him. But he's also hasn't done a lot of things to really stand out in Chicago. And that makes me sad. I'm going to go back to full screen real quick because I love Mitch Trubisky. I'll say it. I might be a Mitch Trubisky stan, you might call it. And it's really, like, it's not even, like, I understand that he has not been good. And that makes me sad as a Mitch Trubisky stan. And the reason why I'm a Mitch Trubisky stan is really 2 reasons. Number 1, Mitch grew up 30 to 35 minutes from me. And if you know anything about me, well, first off, I am from Cleveland, but we're going to get to that. The big thing here is I support people who come out of my city. I just love it, right? Coming up in Cleveland, I also associate with Akron, but just specifically like Cleveland people, right? Coming up in Cleveland, it's just like, there's just this culture which is like, it's so cool to see people make it out of here. Because of how frequently and often Cleveland gets shit on. So I love when people come up from here. My favorite artist is Machine Gun Kelly. I have a Terry Rozier jersey in my closet, Cleveland, Ohio native. Mitch Trubisky, one of my favorite quarterbacks, and that because he's from Cleveland, but also more so this, right? I am a diehard University of North Carolina fan. Like, I love the Tar Heels more than I love any other professional sports team. It does, like, I've been with them since I was in 3rd grade, so I think we're going on year 16 or 17 of my fandom. And so the fact that he is from here, where I'm from, and he went to my favorite school, and he's made it to the NFL and being a starting quarterback in that way, like, he's He's so cool. He's so cool to me. And he's also just like 2 years older than me, which is also just wild. But that's my Mitch spiel. But I understand he has not been good. So let's talk about Mitch Trubisky in 2019. He finished as quarterback 26 overall. 15 games played, 14.1 points per game. His new finish is quarterback 31. Not great. But here's the interesting thing about Mitch Trubisky is the weekly finishes. He had 5 games as a quarterback 1, 3 games as a quarterback 2, and 7 games as a quarterback 3. So he killed you. The fact of the matter is that he did kill you because you're like 3 games outside the top, or I'm sorry, 3 games outside the top 12 and 7 games outside of the top 24. That's brutal. But Mitch Trubisky does this thing every single year, it now feels like, where he'll just go on these little sporadic runs, and within those sporadic runs, like, he's just red hot. He is on fire. I'm pulling up the list right now, the game log. Alright. So this was week 10 through 14 of last season. Let's see. Quarterback 9, quarterback 22, quarterback 9, quarterback 7, quarterback 3. So he gave you, in a 5-week span, he gave you 4 QB1 finishes. And that's really the story with Mitch Trubisky, is that we see it time and time again, but he just fails to put it together all at once, and that makes things really frustrating, especially if you are a Chicago Bears fan, because it's very much almost like Jameis Winston, but like the poor man's version of Jameis Winston, and the fact of you see all the good that he can do, but the mistakes and the errors just tank everything else, and it's just one of those things where you wish you got good Mitch consistently, but that unfortunately just doesn't happen. His current ADP is going outside of the top 26 quarterbacks, so that's going past 1405. I should have put a plus sign after that, my apologies. I have him ranked as quarterback 34, and it's just as simple as I don't think he's going to play a full season. I think this guy, Nick Foles, is going to come in and also play. I literally think they're going to split 8-8. And so I'm not excited about the Bears quarterbacks in any sort of fashion. So let's just talk about Nick Foles here real quick. Nick Foles was traded for by the Bears after signing a 4-year, $80 or $88 million deal with Jacksonville. And if you don't know, I used to be a Jacksonville Jaguars fan, but once Nick Foles, and they gave him that contract, once Foles signed there, I said I was done. Like, that was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. So Nick Foles is the singular reason why I'm no longer a fan of I guess he's one of 2 reasons, because he didn't draft Lamar. Why I'm no longer a fan of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So in 2019, his finish was quarterback 43 after signing that monster deal. He came back, or he played in week 1, came out as the starter, and then broke his collarbone against Kansas City, and that really derailed his season. He tried to come back, and they just gave the reins back to Gardner Minshew, who was playing pretty well at the time for a 6th-round rookie. So in 2019, Foles had 1 game as a QB1, 1 game as a QB2, and 1 game as a QB3. I don't know if that's actually... Hang on. Wait a sec. I feel like he didn't have a game as a QB1. Maybe he did, though. Let's see. I feel like that was just the leftover Foles. Foles. No, he did. In week 11, he finished as QB12, so that information is accurate. All right, back to Foles, though. Where we at? I have too many tabs open. Okay, there we go. So Foles in 2019 had 77 pass completions on 117 attempts, 736 yards, 23 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. You can see the adjusted score, like he just didn't get on the field enough to produce anything whatsoever. So his new finish was quarterback 39. I didn't actually go through Mitch's stats. Let's do that real quick as well. We're pretty much just lumping these 2 together because I think their storylines are kind of similar. Mitch had 326 completions on 516 attempts, 3,100 yards, 193 rushing yards, 19 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. The thing with Mitch is #sneaky athleticism, where he does have the option and he does have the opportunity to give you the potential of over 200 rushing yards, which is nice because it makes up for any kind of interceptions that he might have. You're always going to be net positive because of that. And the real issue really is that he hasn't thrown a whole lot of touchdowns. I believe it was 2017 where he might have. Wait, what did he throw in 2017? Let's pull this up real quick. Because in 2017, I believe that was the year where he. Yeah, right. 2018, excuse me. So last season, he had 24 touchdowns. So it's like we know that he can eclipse that number. He can eclipse 19. But the question is, you're not going to get a 30 or even 28 probably touchdown season from him. He just plays a little bit too conservative to hit that. And that's really the issue with Trubisky is that yes, you're going to get those boom games like I talked about, but at the same time, you're never really confident in starting him, and there lies the issue, right? Because you only start one quarterback unless you are in a 2 QB or super flex league, you're only starting one of these guys, and there are just so many other options that you would rather have starting week in, week out than Mitch Trubisky. And Nick Foles is kind of in that same category. Let's go back to him. I have him ranked as quarterback 32. I just think he is a little bit of a better talent than Mitch, and so he'll be able to put up just a bit more fantasy points. I have them split literally 2 spots, and that's honestly just because, I think they're going to split the season, and also I just don't know how wide that talent gap actually is going to be. So I'm not excited about either of them, and Foles' ADP is also outside the top 26, going outside of the 14th round. All in all, I'm staying away. I don't like the upside for any of these guys, and it makes me sad because, like I said, hashtag Mitch Stan. If I were to take one, I'd probably end up taking Foles, and that's just because I think we've seen it from him a little bit more, and maybe you get the more consistent, 16-point games where he's not going to absolutely kill you. And then the other thing is that it's also worth noting that the Bears did trade for Foles on his massive contract with Jacksonville. So they clearly see something, even if it is just a guy to just come in and just bring in a steady presence to the offense. And maybe something that Mitch hasn't been providing that team with during his time there. It was one of the reasons why I like Teddy Bridgewater in Carolina so much. I understand the move on why they moved on from Cam Newton because they just needed a guy to come in and just kind of steady the boat just a bit. And I feel like Foles is kind of in that same situation in Chicago. Now let's talk about the running game and with the Bears. And we're going to talk about David Montgomery, second-year running back for the Bears. Finishes 22 in standard and 25 in PPR. And he really let a lot of people down last season because the hype for Montgomery was so massive. So he finished as 2 games as a running back 1, 3 as a running back 2, and 4 games as a running back 3. 242 carries. It's on 25 receptions. 888 rushing yards, 185 receiving yards, and 7 touchdowns. When you look at the adjusted score, it doesn't really help him all that much. 9.9 points per game, 16 games played, a new finish of running back 31. His ADP is currently running back 23, going at 411, so that's back 4, early 5. I also have him ranked as running back 23, so I'm right in line with the ADP. However, as I was making this player profile and I was looking at ADP, I was shocked. I was shocked when I was looking at ADP. I have him ranked as running back 23, and I was expecting him to be going pretty much around running back 27 to 30. And the reason why, because he did let so many people down. A lot of people are down on the Bears offense this season. And so I really felt like that Montgomery could be a value for your team. To me, he is one of the few workhorses, potential workhorses in the NFL. And that has me really excited because I think he could be a 3-down running back in the league if he were to get the reception totals. But unfortunately, I don't know if that's the case because they have Tarik Cohen still. But because he burned so many people last season and because he just didn't live up to the hype, I felt like there was an opportunity to get some value here. And so what I actually looked up was I used a different source of ADP, just to kind of have in the back burner. So the ADP that you're seeing on screen right now is from Fantasy Football Calculator, which is where I've gotten all my ADPs from for all my player profiles. Because to me, that's kind of a simpler way of using ADP instead of just going platform to platform and just trying to average it out from there. However, when I looked at ESPN's ADP, they have him currently, his ADP on ESPN is currently running back 27. So to me, he is a value, and that's really what I was looking for. I was trying to figure out, where are you comfortable drafting David Montgomery, because for me, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing it until late 5th, early 6th, and that's like kind of like the shorter side of things. I love the potential of him that late, and the reason why is because if he doesn't pan out this season again and he really just slogs on like he did last season, you're not going to lose anything. But you can get a potential fantasy star here at that late of a draft price, going in that 6th round territory after you already have your core of running backs already filled out. So by the 6th round, you probably have either 3 running backs or at least 2, and then getting Montgomery as your 4th or 3rd option is absolutely beautiful because you won't have to rely on him week in and week out. So that opportunity cost has me really excited for him this season if you can get him that late. And he's been one of the guys that I'm really considering targeting all throughout the mid-rounds of my drafts. But now let's move on to the receiving options of this team. And we're going to start off with the running back position there too. Tarik Cohen, and who lit the fantasy world on fire in 2018, I believe it was. But in 2019, really regressed. He finished as running back 44 in standard, running back 37 in PPR, so he was just outside the running back 3 territory. One game is running back 1, 4 is a 2, and 4 is a 3. He had 64 carries, but he had 79 receptions, 213 rushing yards, 456 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. When you look at the adjusted score, 7.8 points per game on 16 games played. His new finish is running back 43. I'm going to pull up Cohen's stats real quick. Let's do this. I love doing these things live, by the way, because I love that you guys get to like see my full reactions and how I quickly change opinions on the fly if I have to. So let's see, receiving. Yeah, so it was last season. It was 2 years ago in 2018 when he did have that monster game. He had 71 receptions, 727 rushing yards, and 5 touchdowns. So really, just those numbers all plummeted. He in that 2018 year, he was averaging 10 yards a catch. Now it dropped down to 5.8, and he also lost 2 touchdowns. So the question really becomes, what happened to Tarik Cohen? To me, it's very simple. It's just that this offense last season was not good. It stalled, it didn't move the ball well, and everything crumbled as a result of it, especially for Cohen. Now, compared to the year before, where, yes, the offense probably wasn't great, but at least it was manageable, and at least they moved the ball goal to goal, in some manner, right? We just talked about Mitch. Mitch had 5 or 6 more touchdowns in 2018 than he did in 2019. Ultimately, for me, for Cohen is just a PPR guy. I'm not excited for him in standard whatsoever, but you can't deny the fact that he is going to get you 80 receptions pretty much every single year. And so that's going to equate to either 40 or 80 points alone, depending on your scoring format. And he's also going to at least have some carries through the backfield as well. Obviously, he's not going to give you, 150 carries or anything like that. But 64 carries is still somewhat respectable from more so of a pass-catching running back. But he really is going to do all of his work in the receiving game, and that's fine. That's fine. But to me, ultimately, I'm not a guy that really targets. I'm not a guy that targets receiving running backs that are the backup, like third down backs. They don't intrigue me because you're pretty much only getting them for a few plays every single drive, and that's just not enough to add up in totality to what you actually need. Like I said, I'd consider him more so in PPR than in standard, and it's even funny because as I say all this, you look at the ADP, I do have him higher than his current ADP, and that's just because if Foles comes in, I do think this offense improves just a little bit. It goes back to just kind of it goes back to the point where at least they are able to move the ball, and I think Cohen benefits as a result of that. But I'm not all in all too excited about Tarik Cohen this season. He's just not a guy that I normally target. I've never targeted guys like him or James White, or even in the past, probably besides this year or last year, Austin Eckler. Just pass-catching running backs that are the number 2 option in the backfield on a team. I'm not really all too excited about them in general. But let's talk about someone who I am excited about, and just because he is one of my favorite players, and that is Allen Robinson. I have his jersey hanging up in my closet, pretty much 10 feet from me. So Allen Robinson is an absolute beast of a wide receiver. In my opinion, he is the most underrated wide receiver in the NFL. In 2019, he finished as wide receiver 12 in standard and 11 in PPR. 5 games as wide receiver 1, 3 games as a 2, and 2 games as a 3. 154 targets, 98 catches, 1,147 yards, and 7 touchdowns. 12.9 points per game on 16 games played. His new finish is wide receiver 15. Allen Robinson was really good for your fantasy team despite playing with an awful quarterback pretty much throughout the entirety of his career, but specifically last year. He showed again what he can do when he gets the opportunity and really just cemented himself as the number 1 wide receiver in Chicago. Let me pull up these wide receiver 1 finishes. They were a bit sporadic, and I think that is the... he actually had one stretch there between weeks 12 and 14 where he had 3 straight games as a 1. But I think the big issue here, and the thing that you're really going to see, is that he did finish just outside the top 10, despite only finishing as a top 36 wide receiver in 50% of his games. Ironically enough, this is something that Jason Moore brought up on the Footballers podcast a bit earlier this week, and he was basically comparing Allen Robinson to Tyler Boyd and their numbers, and I thought that was really fascinating. But Allen Robinson might be I hate saying this. Allen Robinson might be a guy where he just does more work in totality than week to week, even though, as we saw last season with those 5 finishes as a 1 and what we've seen in years past in Jacksonville with bad quarterback play, where he does have the potential to give you those those wide receiver 1 finishes week in and week out, but it's really just a matter of him being hindered by quarterback play. And that's really unfortunate because he is such a special talent and he is so good. I think he's one of the most underrated route runners in the NFL. He's extremely talented, but he'll never be able to kind of be put in that conversation with some of the more elite guys, and that's just simply because the quarterback play holds him back. And that's something that I think you really have to think about when you draft Allen Robinson, because his draft cost right now is currently wide receiver 12 at 310. I have him ranked at number 10. I even considered moving him up a spot to number 9 ahead of Mike Evans, but I put Mike Evans ahead, again, because of quarterback play. But when you're looking on the clock and you're staring down Allen Robinson as potentially your number 1 wide receiver, how excited are you for that? I think that's something that you really have to ask yourself. I'm pulling it up right now, right? So like I said, he's wide receiver 12 going at 310. So let's say you start your draft off running back, 3rd round, you're on the clock, you're looking for a wide receiver. I'm going to throw out some names here. Allen Robinson or Calvin Ridley. Allen Robinson or Cortland Sutton. Allen Robinson or T.Y. Hilton. Allen Robinson or A.J. Brown. Allen Robinson or Cooper Kupp. Allen Robinson or DJ Moore. Right? These are things that you have to ask yourself. And now, admittedly, when I look at that, I probably take Robinson over Sutton. I think it's a toss-up between him and Ridley. I am a little bit cooler on Ridley compared to ADP. I take Robinson over T.Y. Hilton. I think A.J. Brown, that's an interesting conversation because I have A.J. Brown at 13. I believe I have A.J. Brown at 13 and Robinson at 11. I'm sorry. I have Robinson at 10, A.J. Brown, I believe, at 13. So I think that's an interesting conversation. And so I'm scared to draft Allen Robinson based upon quarterback play. But that being said, the move to trade for Nick Foles implies, in theory, that they see Foles as an upgrade compared to Trubisky in this offense. And so you would have to equate that to more fantasy points for Allen Robinson, which is always a good thing. But then the question becomes, well, he put up these numbers with Mitch Trubisky at quarterback, and now what happens if Nick Foles comes in? And, is Nick Foles going to pepper Robinson with targets 150 times? I don't know. I just have a lot of questions surrounding Allen Robinson. I don't deny the talent, but as I've said before, I think how you score your fantasy points is more important than how many fantasy points you score. Consistency is one of the big things that I look for when drafting at all. It doesn't matter upon position, but especially at wide receiver. Now, finally, we're going to wrap up the Chicago Bears with Anthony Miller, who a lot of people expect to be a breakout candidate last season, and unfortunately just didn't see the field at all. He was dealing through some injuries throughout the first half of the season, but when he finally got onto the field towards the back half of the season, he was pretty good. He was pretty good, and it makes me sad because I drafted Anthony Miller in Dynasty, and because he was towards the bottom of my bench, I needed to make in-season moves. I unfortunately released him, and now I kind of want him back this season. So, 2019 finish, wide receiver 62 in standard, wide receiver 58 in PPR, 2 games as a wide receiver 1, 0 as a 2, 3 as a 3, 85 targets, 52 catches, 656 yards on 2 touchdowns, 6.3 points per game on 16 games played. His new finish is wide receiver 71. However, again, the issue that I have admittedly with my adjusted score, and this is something that I'm going to definitely take a look into next season as I try and just revise some of my approaches, is that points per game score is kind of wrong. Yes, he played in all 16, but he was barely on the field for the first half of the season. I'm looking at his snap counts. It was basically 50% of the time. Week 1, 22%. Week 2 through 4, 52, 52, 63. And then pretty much everything else was just kind of hit or miss. But really what we need to talk about is week 11 onward, because that was when he really did show out. Snap percentages: 86, 55, 86, 89, 94, 100. And that's where, and then we look at the target numbers: 11, 9, 13, 4, 15. And that's like, when Anthony Miller sees the ball and sees targets, Anthony Miller is fucking great. This is year 2 of this. So I'm pulling up his everything, those wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 3 numbers are all come from that span. Week 11 through 15. He finished as wide receiver 35, 27, 31, 11, and 5. When Anthony Miller gets the opportunity, he's been really good. And here's something that I think is a really interesting point, and I haven't heard a lot of people, if any at all, bring this up. We all gassed the hell out of D.D. Westbrook last season when Nick Foles was expected to be the starting quarterback. And the reason why was 2 things. 1, we love the talent. And number 2, Nick Foles relentlessly targets the slot wide receiver for whatever team he plays for. Well, I got news for you. Anthony Miller might be just as talented as D.D. Westbrook if only he were to stay healthy for a full season. And number 2, we are all expecting Nick Foles to be the starting quarterback in some capacity for the Bears this season. So why are we not all gassing the absolute hell out of Anthony Miller? I have him ranked as my wide receiver 47. I hate my ranking for him. I'll tell you that right now. That number needs to be higher, and the reason why it isn't is just because, I said this before, there are a lot of good wide receivers in the NFL. Again, a shocking take. I should be barred from saying anything remotely close to that. But all jokes aside, he's being drafted as wide receiver 52 in round 11. If the Bears come out September 6th, and obviously you probably already have your draft by then, but who knows if Anthony Miller actually gets drafted in your league. It's likely, but maybe let's just say it doesn't, right? Because in the 11th round, that's when you really just start throwing darts, and then there's a chance that Anthony Miller slips through the cracks in that way. But if at any point during this offseason it looks like that Nick Foles is going to start the season for the Bears, I want Anthony Miller to skyrocket up draft boards, because he should. Because he has the talent, he has the opportunity, because what wide receiver did they just let go? Oh no, that's going to drive me nuts. I know they brought in Ted Ginn, I'm not worried about that. Oh, what wide receiver did they just let go? It was, Taylor Gabriel. Thank you. Was it Taylor Gabriel? That's not right. Is it? It was Taylor Gabriel. All right. Yeah, I was right. All right. So they let Taylor Gabriel walk in walk-in free agency. And now Anthony Miller actually gets the opportunity to step on the field. So this is a three-part equation. Number one, talent. I love the talent. Number two, production. That's like a four-part equation. We've already seen it. Like, whenever he's on the field, he's been great. Number three, opportunity. He's finally getting the opportunity to be on the field consistently, which is something that we haven't seen for the past 2 seasons. And number four, quarterback. We all expect Nick Foles to be in at some capacity for the Bears, and we all gassed the hell out of D.D. Westbrook because he played the slot and Nick Foles targeted the slot. So we need to bring that same energy for Anthony Miller, put some respect on his name. But I think that's going to do it for our Chicago Bears team preview for the 2020 season as far as fantasy football goes. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. We're trying to do this thing every single day leading up to the start of the NFL season. The goal is to have this series done by August 31st, and we are right on track to do so. Up next, we have my favorite division in the NFL, the AFC West. Kansas City, Las Vegas, LA, and Denver. There's a ton of fantasy firepower to be had on all 4 of those teams, so I'm really excited to get a jump on them in just a few days. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Remember, people come and go, but fantasy championships are forever. Later.